It's May the 1st, 2024. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to be your host, Dana Durnford. Welcome to the show. You can call in at 709-589-4406. All lines are currently opened, which is very unusual. Usually the phone is ringing off the hooks. No, just kidding you. This was the ALP system in 2013, February. They had just started it. That's the water filtration system, right? And so on February 11, 2013, the media was given a press tour. This was one of the pictures that they took. In August of 2014, they announced that they think they finally have the decontamination system operational. 2014. 2014, right? Almost the end of the fourth quarter of 2014. The reactors were blown up on the 6th day. So they lost all their inventories on the 6th day, March 16, 2011. They didn't lose everything. They lost 95% of the inventories. Reactor 2 apparently burnt for several days and went China syndrome. The fuel pools included. And Reactor 1 detonated, as you know, if you've been around a bit. And we do believe the reactor core has gone China syndrome. That didn't burn off, that didn't cook off with the explosion and the subsequent meltdowns over the next several days. This headline yesterday caught me totally off guard. States want compensation for radiation exposures from nuclear plants, which that doesn't mention that in the story of nuclear plants, but that's quite the headline. And this is an appropriate headline, and that to help articulate that, we have a poll tonight. Should nuclear plants / dumps, also dumps, are also known as disease factories that produces death atoms, are surrounded by farms, which is almost all of them, be closed at once to preserve human life? And I think they should, right? Doesn't that make sense to everybody? Like, we don't call them death atoms because they're harmless. We don't call them dirty bombs because they're like bananas. And we don't have laws restricting access to it because they're like potato chips or walking in sunshine. Right? We have these attributes because this is very dangerous stuff, very long past the human experience. I don't think there's a show tomorrow night. I done a show yesterday afternoon, and I slept all night. Right after 11 o'clock last night, I went to bed. I slept till early this morning, 7 a.m. or so, 7:30 I think it was. And then I had 3 more naps today, so that tells you how drained my body actually is. A lot of it got to do with stress, right? Because I can't do the things I need to do. It wears me down. It's the whole story is absurd. We don't have any foundations that care about the anti-nuclear whatsoever. Only the controlled opposition, right? Like Greenpeace and that. So for radiation exposures from nuclear plants is appropriate because all nuclear plants are hemorrhaging radiation into the ecosystem 24 hours a day. And every nuclear power plant should be surrounded by billions of one-ton black bags of radioactive fallout because the fuel pools are all hemorrhaging radiation into the ecosystem. The fuel pools have no containment, and when you take the reactor cores out of the reactor, out of the containment, you put them in the fuel pools, they're still cooking hot, right? And what that means is they're splitting atoms. And the amount of atoms we're talking about is more than all the stars we know in the solar system, for instance, every minute. are being released into the ecosystem 24 hours a day. There's 1,000 fuel pools worldwide. And this is an unusual picture. Those birds are probably not real. Because I can't give you a picture from Newfoundland on the east coast of Canada, for instance, or from British Columbia with birds in the ears flying. Because in the last 7, 8, 9 years, we have never seen a group of birds. They've been exterminated to migratory species, for instance. 46 million are missing from the east coast of Canada. MIAs due to the nuclear radioactive fallout that's broken the food chain. So state wants compensation for radiation exposures from nuclear plants. And again, I'd like to welcome all the people. We got 12 people on my show, which is an amazing amount of people. You know, I've been doing this for a decade, and I never thought for a minute that I could get up to 12 people on my show at one time. It's been a labor of love, and 6 years of doing research expeditions on top of it. And I'm just amazed that we can get 12 people on a show on YouTube. If you work really hard for a decade, you too could have 12 people on your shows. Something to think about, because I know that's far exceeding the average person's hopes and dreams, getting 12 people on a show. And the most important topic in human history on top of that. A Knoxville-based environmental group is advocating for the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act expansion, currently awaiting House approval. Why is it awaiting House approval? They got endless money for fusion that doesn't exist. They got endless money for small modular reactors that don't exist. They got endless money for an industry that poisons everything and everybody within 1,000 miles. But they got no money for the victims. It will provide compensation in more states like Tennessee for radiation exposures from the government nuclear activities like weapon testing, uranium mining. But it's really interesting because the head of it says for radiation exposures from nuclear plants. But they don't mention that in the story anywhere that I noticed. But it's an unusual. I've never seen a headline like that before. And it's an appropriate headline on top of that. The industry worships evil, and nuclear is the very epitome of it. This expansion bill does extend compensation to people in Tennessee. It will directly affect us because it would allow people here to receive compensation from being exposed to radiation from nuclear waste, which is a big issue. All nuclear waste is splitting atoms into the ecosystem. So theoretically, they don't say the word nuclear plant in the story, but the nuclear waste is kept typically at the nuclear power plant site, right? So, bless their hearts for acknowledging something like that. Very courageous for them to do that. The nuclear industry will gut them now, but at least they've done something moral that they can be proud of. Uranium miners, millers, and ore transporters may be eligible also for one-time payment of a measly $100,000. And we've covered stories like this before where they say, which is not enough to pay for their radiation therapy from cancer, but that's murder. Getting radiation therapy is actually murder. If you give your loved ones radiation therapy, that's murder. And doctors that give children radiation therapy should be charged with child abuse and murder. Radiation can't cure you. It's ridiculous to suggest it could. There's nothing in the universe that has an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. So putting it in your body is the worst case scenario, right? Cardill emphasizes the importance of the Tennesseans collaborating with lawmakers to work on expanding the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act, since the existing program expires less than 60 days. And if it expires, it'll never be resurrected again, I bet you. And if you work at Hanford for a single 8-hour shift in the last 80 years, one lousy 8-hour shift, you're entitled to a compensation. You don't have to prove you got sick because of working there. It's assumed you got sick if you were there. Think about that statement. And that would hopefully steer you in the right path to comprehend the enormity of what we're dealing with when we talk about nuclear, the evilness of nuclear itself. And the nuclear community are chose because they're disconnected. They're heartless and soulless and spineless and cowards. And they're monstrous in every action that they use and do. The House Speaker has to bring it up by June, which is when the RECA is set to expire. So we do want to urge people to call the Speaker, Mike Johnson. And I urge everybody tonight, all 12 of you, wonderful souls, to call Mike Johnson. They added that the U.S. Senate passed a reauthorization of the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act on March the 7th. However, current benefits are limited to Pacific regions, excluding areas affected by events like the Trinity atomic bomb test in New Mexico. But why wouldn't you same compensation for the Bikini Atolls? The radiation fallout is not limited to a state. It covers the whole country and surrounding countries and nations. It really is a curse on humanity. States want compensation for radiation exposures from nuclear plants, and so every nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms. Not just the community, but every nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms. And so it'd be appropriate to compensate everybody that ate from those farms, wouldn't it? Let me just give you 7 or 8 examples of what I'm talking about. Why is every nuclear power plant, except for a handful, surrounded by farms, right? Because, and even the weapons factories like Sellafield right there, which used to be called Windscale, inhaling just one hot particle can cause a cancer. So all the fuel pools at these sites are hemorrhaging radiation into the ecosystem. When I say the word hemorrhaging, that still doesn't do it justice. You know, each reactor core they put in a fuel pool every 14, 15 months or something like that. They're going to take at least a third of the reactor core and put it in the fuel pools. Fuel pools are going to boil off 120,000 liters a day. It's incredibly radioactive. The fuel is still splitting atoms. This is why they're putting it in a pool. This is why it's hot. And this is why it's dangerous for millions of years. It's because it's, not because of the toxicity, that's the game they've been playing on you now for 80 years. It's because it's splitting atoms that never go away and that are pulsing energy almost at the speed of light. And, you know, they have endless millions and millions of studies showing how plants and trees and fruit and vegetables and medicine uptake radiation. So then why is every nuclear power plant, except for a handful, surrounded by farms? And then the toxicity of it is unconscionable. It's well established, yet they claim that they don't know much about it. But if you go back to last week's show on Chernobyl's anniversary, which I done on the 25th, not the 26th, if you go back and watch that, there's around 400 academic studies there. And so when you say they don't understand, it hasn't been studied on this, that, and anything else, it's complete dishonest to suggest that they don't understand. It's completely dishonest. It's a bald-faced lie. It's a very dangerous lie, a lethal lie, in fact. Knowing that the toxicity is incredibly bad, why is every nuclear power plant surrounded by farms? Knowing how lethal and deadly it is to humans and adults and animals and birds and insects, why is every nuclear power plant surrounded by farms? So the food will suck up the radiation, the vapors, the heavy vapors are going to fall close by. They're going to be saturated with the worst of the isotopes on top of that. That's why they have those long, skinny stacks. They're meant to vent the radiation off site. See? They're taller. These are the steam stacks. They're not going to be radiation. There is some radiation comes out of them. But there's 3 tall, skinny stacks. They're venting the fuel pools and the incinerators. Because all nuclear plants, for some reason, are allowed to have an incinerator. And you can't hurt radiation by putting it through an incinerator. You're just going to liberate it into the ecosystem. Same as forest fires will do. Just liberate it back into the ecosystem. And should nuclear plants and dumps, also known as disease factories that produce the death atoms, are surrounded by farms, be closed at once? I mean, that's a completely legitimate question. Inside Fukushima's empty villages. And this is what they show you, right? Some vehicles and farmland, not farmland. But what they should be showing you is the reality. And this story got a terrible twist to it. In November 2012, Jeff Brumfield, we covered him quite a few times over the years, traveled to Fukushima Prefecture to learn about how the nuclear accident has affected the mental health. Well, it does, like, he's using mental health because he's saying it's radiophobia. And he produced studies saying it's radiophobia. And we'll show you a couple of them. Which is the lowest form of life, really, someone to do something like that. Like, it's such a dishonest thing, I can't, because it's not illegal to poison you with radiation, then he didn't really commit a crime. Even though it 100% unequivocally should be illegal to poison you with radiation. Every nuclear power plant should be closed because to preserve insects and birds and humans. To learn more about how the nuclear accident has affected the mental health, what is Alzheimer's and dementia. The first studies they do after a nuclear meltdown, by the way, is autism and Down syndrome. Because they know they're going to find a massive spike in it. But yet, Jeff's job was to cover it up. Jeff's very good at stuff like that. These photographs documented his trip into the empty villages around the plant. Not these photographs. He's not going to show you nothing like that. So read the whole story. Fukushima, fallout of fear. Think about how evil you got to be to produce a study, which is this study right here, and to downplay something so evil. Like, it boggles my mind when people think of serial killers. Jeff Brumfield should be at the top of the list. He should be one of the most evilest people. There should be 100 documentaries on how evil that person actually is. Japan kept people safe from the physical effects of radiation, not from the psychological impacts. You got any idea how evil you got to be to do it? Because he knows the difference. But to produce a study like that, to mock the victims, I can't wrap my mind around it. I can't comprehend that kind of evilness. I don't have words to describe it either. You know, there's 865,000 extra cancers in the first year. So he done this study in 2013. So he knew there was 865,000 extra cancers. Not everybody was diagnosed. Not everybody has health care. And this was the first year, very first year, see? So to go produce a study and suggest that Japan kept people safe from the physical effects of radiation, where they picked up 30 million one-ton bags, and we created so far 2,000 of pictures like this because we only have 1,000 real pictures, and we're trying to create the other 149,000 pictures that are missing because there was 150,000 sites where they stored the radioactive one-ton bags. So as a monument to the victims, I'm trying to create 149,000 pictures that are missing. But he said not from the psychological impact. So he's suggesting that the 30 million one-ton bags that were picked up there didn't happen, that the nuclear meltdowns didn't happen. And as soon as you look at him, you know this is a monster. Right? They all got that exact same look, right? Ken Abusler looks exactly like that. all these apologists over the years, they look exactly like, they had that exact look on them, right? People like that should be put in one of these 1-ton bags of radiation. It says the milk in many ways resembled that product produced by mammals. He worked as a senior editor and correspondent at Utah Public Radio. So he has a cushy job now with Utah Public Radio because they know they can count on good old Jeff to sell everybody out when the shit hits the fan for any corporation in the future. He's got a really good job, making a ton of money, being a monster, being a serial killer, being a creating an omnicide on this planet. It's very difficult for me to comprehend something like that. It's hard for me to wrap around why he's so evil. Why do people become this evil? Why is Jeff Brumfile so evil? There should be like hundreds and hundreds of documentaries trying to understand. Like Charles Manson got nothing on this person. Literally nothing on Jeff. This is a serial killer that makes Mao and Pol Pot look like schoolyard bullies. This is a real-life monster, what we're talking about here. If you picked up all the radiation in just Fukushima Prefecture, not the other 13 prefectures where the food was banned by 55 countries for a decade, but just Fukushima Prefecture, they only clean up 3%, and you don't clean it up, you're only picking up 2 centimeters of topsoil. 2 centimeters of topsoil is laughable. To suggest that is cleaning up a nuclear accident, it's laughable. And you can make a road of 1-ton bags like you're seeing here around the planet about 12 times if you clean up Fukushima Prefecture. Just the 2 centimeters that they clean up for the 30 million 1-ton bags. But he says it's in your head. And so that person should be in jail for the rest of his life on death row. This is a monster, a real-life monster. There's no redeeming qualities whatsoever. He said, after Fukushima nuclear disaster, Japan kept people safe from the physical effects of radiation. It's the furthest thing from the truth imaginable. But it's okay because Jeff got a nice cushy job now at UPR, major media, national broadcaster, right? So that makes everything acceptable, see? The medical university in Fukushima City became a hub, and in the days and weeks after the accident, the university hospital took in seriously ill patients from the coast. It also found itself on the front line of a nuclear emergency. He said doctors use Geiger counters to screen evacuees' thyroid glands, which are particularly sensitive to radiation. And you know they're a scumbag when they do that, when you hear that kind of connotations, right? You know that's the lowest form of life you're going to ever come across in your lifetime. There's always going to be the pro-nuclear community, but Jeff is an exceptional evil scumbag. The few attempts made so far, and you can use a Geiger counter to quantify the radiation. You know, the thyroid glands, it's true, there was the thyroid glands were incredibly radioactive. Just in the first year, there was 13,646 children out of 38,000 that had tumors 2 centimeters or larger on the thyroid glands, which means they're producing silly amounts, repulsive amounts of radioactive hormones, which also means, though, now they're going to be producing an unconscionable amount of radioactive stem cells in their skeleton. The few attempts made so far, however, have generally shown minimal risk, said the scumbag. The Health Survey's latest assessments suggest the dose for nearly all the evacuees were very low, with a maximum of only 25,000 microsieverts, 25 millisieverts, and below the so-called 100 millisieverts exposure has been linked to increases risk of cancers in survivors. The Hiroshima and Nagasaki survivors weren't tested for internal radiation. They weren't given medical treatment for internal until about 3 years ago, were they given health care 72 years after the nuclear weapons. And this is what the industry is doing, right? Is using Hiroshima and Nagasaki as a benchmark for nuclear accidents. When a nuclear accident, each of the buildings had 6 million pounds. The bombs had 15 pounds. Each of the reactor buildings had 2 fuel pools stuffed with 4 decades of reactor cores. Like, I can't comprehend that kind of evil. And how long have we been doing this, right? For over 2 decades. And doing this live on Fukushima for over a decade. We cover this every day. 5 days a week typically, if I'm not out doing research expeditions over the years. If I'm on land, then I'm covering scumbags. And it's just a constant barrage of these monsters every day, all day long. And we try to cover the lies each day to keep this story alive. And you can't even keep up with that. Every nuclear power plant is a massive disease factory. The World Health Organization, which has no sovereignty over any country, has issued a reassuring report in May saying that most evacuees from places like Nami, which is abandoned, received doses of 10 to 50 millisieverts. Did note that infants might have received a dose that could increase the risk of cancer. And so when you only talk about cancer when there's endless health issues, diseases, autoimmune deficiencies, injuries, illnesses, besides cancer. But this is what we see consistently from the barrage of people like Jeff the notorious monster, Jeff the sadistic demon. Every nuclear plant should look like that in the first 3 years, picking up the radiation. There should never be a farm around a nuclear plant within 500 miles of a nuclear power plant. 1,000 miles within a... There should never be a farm. They should never be on our planet. You can't contain the radiation. So once you take the fuel out of the reactor the first time and put it in a pool, you are poisoning everything within 1,000 miles. Every bird, every bee, every pollinator, every insect. The epitome of evil is people like Jeff, though. They're a level of evil that is exceptional, and that history will never forget this exception, I can guarantee you. A poll published last year by the Pew Research Center in America, the pro-nuclears, found that 76% of the Japanese people believed the food from Fukushima was not safe, despite the government's and scientific assurances to the contrary, like Jeff. Followed of fear. Despite the fact he picked up 30 million one-ton bags, he's saying it's all in your head. It's unconscionable. People like that, now they got a cushy job in the major media, ready to stab you in the throat again and your loved ones in the chest again. His job is to eventually stab everybody in the throat, in the neck, in the stomach. His job is to rip the guts open of babies. That's what he does for a hobby. He would do it for free, because that's what evil does, right? The children carry dosimeters provided by the Health Survey to collect radiation data and to calm the public's concern. So how can you collect radiation data but say there's no radiation concerns? And why would you do it to children? Why wouldn't you evacuate them? When are we going to grow up and smell the shit? When are you going to grow up? When is this planet going to come to his senses and fight for a future? Because you've got no future without fighting for it. You got people like Jeff out there ready to sabotage you, and in the prime position to do it too. So they suggest that clinics with specializing in mental health should be set up throughout the prefecture, throughout the nuclear wasteland where no one should be living. Being evil is just a hobby for Jeff, I'm pretty sure. You Ukraine's all-or-nothing game. Russia accuses Kiev of planning use of chemical weapons and radioactive threats. Well, Russia and Ukraine are both using depleted uranium munitions. Ukraine is getting their uranium munitions, the Durnford, depleted uranium, low-level radioactive materials, from United Kingdom, France, and United States. Ukraine's all-or-nothing game. Russia accuses them of using planned use of chemical weapons, radioactive threats, but they're both using Durnford, depleted uranium bombs, dirty bombs. Each of these depleted uranium munitions are a dirty bomb, right? If you live within 100 miles of a nuclear plant, this is how you should be dressed. Despite the constant rocket and artillery shelling, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which also hosts a large storage facility, it's not large, it's massive, it's the biggest in Europe, isn't it? Which could lead to a monstrous environmental disaster. Go away, you gotta be kidding me. You're not gonna have environmental, it's nuclear, it's like a banana and a potato chip, for fuck's sakes. Everybody knows that. Unless you find my site, you get another version of reality that ain't so friggin' pretty. Which ASX companies are best positioned to capitalize on uranium? Well, how can you capitalize on uranium? What are you talking about? This is snake oil salesman. Hang on, I'll show you some evidence if you like. I got some prime evidence I hope will sway you. I'm hoping. Nuclear, this is this year. This is a couple of months ago, January 21st, so a little over 2 months ago. Or 3 months ago. Nuclear goes backwards again. Nuclear power suffered a net loss of 1.7 gigawatt capacity in 2023, whereas renewable capacities additions amounted to a record 507 gigawatts, which is equal to, let's do the math, because for some reason I can't remember the math anymore. We bring in the calculators. Dana, where's the calculator? Dana, bring it. So 507 gigawatts. And divide that by 0.89, which is the typical nuclear power plant of a gigawatt. Oh, well, I screwed that up, did I? I gotta... There's a 507 gigawatts. And divide it by 0.89. I can't even do math tonight, can I? That's 570 large nuclear reactors. And because a typical nuclear reactor is less than a gigawatt, right? It's 0.89 of a gigawatt. When you divide it, because they got 364 gigawatts between 407 reactors that are running, which works out to 0.89 gigawatts per reactor. That's where I came up with that number. And so last year they went down backwards 1.7 gigawatt capacity. Renewables went up 507 large nuclear reactors, animosity equivalent in renewables. Like geothermal is everywhere. Why are you looking at small modular reactors or fusion or nuclear when you have geothermal everywhere? What's the point? Really, what's the point, right? So these are... And this story, by the way, was from March the 27th. And so they got this interview of somebody telling you a lie, and they want you to believe the lie, so you invest in nuclear. When that's the last thing you want to invest in is nuclear. Trust me. Trust me. Oh, well. I know because there was people leaving comments and texting me and everything about the axles for the trailer. I can get a 2,000-pound trailer axle assembly. The whole thing is $260. But for an extra $40, I can get a 3,500-pound trailer axle assembly, brand new one. And I can buy new springs for $40 each. You only need two, right? And they already got the bushings in them, right? And that's what I should be doing. It's probably what I'm going to have to do. But people were saying it's going to cost me $700, $800, $900 to buy a 3,500-pound trailer axle. And this is Canadian money we're talking about. So I can do it for $300. I can get that. And then when we raise enough money, because that sale is on until the 5th, until the 5th of May. Or that sale. The other one I think is standard price though. Yeah, that's standard price, $300 ones. So like it's better for me to do that than it is for me to use the axle I got on the trailer currently, the new trailer. Because like you got to realize we're onto everything is cannibalized right away. It's very difficult to get secondhand parts. And the trailer axle that I got, I didn't realize it, but that axle probably came off something 50 years ago or something. And it's just not going to be safe for me. Yeah, I'm going to have to spend more than that to get that thing up and running, right? Unfortunately, and I apologize to everybody. That's how it works, though. We're dealing with such a small budget. We have to really struggle to keep this operation moving forward. And I don't mind that as long as we can keep it moving forward. I didn't really mean to show that tonight, but I forgot I had that in that pile. But that's the plan, is to raise enough money to pick up the axles and pick up the springs. And then pick up the tires. Or the tires and the rims, you can get them in the same place for $100 each. And that's to carry the small Zodiac. The weather has been just unbelievable, brutal down here. And we've been getting hit with cloud seeding for almost 3 days now. Heavy winds. And the fog is so thick you can barely see across the road, but it's not because fog doesn't do that, right? So that's cloud seeding. And they admit it now in the Weather Channel for the last week or something. But now it's like, holy shit, I'm afraid to go outdoors. Like gale force winds the last couple of days. And you can't see across the street because of the fog. It doesn't work that way. I spent my majority of my life on the ocean when I was young. Fog doesn't work that way. And we have the Guinness Book of World Records for fog here, where you get 127 days a year average of fog. But what we're seeing is not fog. And as I grew up as a fisherman in a community with no automobiles, and so I'm quite familiar with fog. Fog meant you only had fog when there was little or no wind. Because as soon as you got 10 miles per hour, it would dissipate the fog. And because we would have to go out and find our markers, right? And if there's fog, you got to go 3 hours off the coastline with an alarm clock and a compass. And then you got to drift around looking for a orange watch buoy in the ocean 3 hours off the coastline because we didn't have any navigational things back then, right? And as a kid, sharp eyesight, that was my job, to get up on the roof of the boat and spot that buoy. And the sooner you spot it, the sooner you made it back into port and kissed the wharf, right? Because that's what I done. Every day I came ashore, I kissed the wharf right away. The Atlantic Ocean is no joke, okay? Laser excitation of the thorium-229 nucleus. New findings suggest classical quantum physics and nuclear physics can be combined. They're only suggesting it though, right? They got endless money. They come up with the most minute of minute advances, and it might cost them $12 billion, but all of a sudden that's major advancement. But they're still always 50 years away from any coming fruition, right? They got the best of the best laboratories. But if you took these guys for 6 months or 6 weeks even, and put them to work on resolving any issues for digging deeper for geothermal, they would solve it and they can go back to doing what they're doing, wasting everybody's time, energy, monetary, and everything else. But geothermal is everywhere. Why are we even looking at, why are we throwing endless money at these people when you got geothermal right at your fingertips? Anything nuclear can do, and anything small modular reactors might ever do, geothermal can do better. Quicker, sooner, cheaper, faster, easier, and longer. And you don't have to find a storage, deep geological repository for 10 million years to store the waste, because you can recycle everything on the site. But nuclear, 90% of every nuclear site can't be recycled. And the other 10% shouldn't either, because of neutron bombardments. You know, they done a study here in Canada 2 years ago where they'd done the anti-neutrino study. And because we have the Canadian Shield, which is a granite rock just miles and miles deep, and large chunks of the country is granite, right? And so 150 miles away from a reactor, over a mile deep, almost a kilometer and a half deep in the granite, they can still identify the neutrino, the anti-neutrinos, from the nuclear power plant, which would light up in their pure water. Why would you want that on your planet for? Because you're down 150 miles away and a mile deep in granite rock, and you can still... This is a terrible stuff. You know, during the nuclear war, you call it nuclear testing, I believe. That was a nuclear war, same bombs, same radioactive fallout. And you use much more than you would in a nuclear war on top of that. You know, like the Soviet Union was equal to 3,800 Nagasaki, which is a plutonium bomb, by the way. Was equal to, as a hydrogen plutonium, was equal to 3,800 Nagasaki bombs going off at one time. If two countries set off 1,900 Nagasaki-type 15-kiloton bombs each in the same spot, the same part of the country, like 200 square mile part of a country, for instance, would that be considered a war or not? That would be a devastating war, right? Nuclear war. So how can nuclear testing not be considered a war? I mean, my goodness, what they done to the Marshall Islands was equal to a Nagasaki bomb every day for 12 years, the radioactive fallout. Still 1 million square miles too radioactive to be habitable. I digress today. And I'll figure it out. Since the 70s, there have been speculation that there might be a special atomic nucleus, which, unlike other nuclides, could, maybe, perhaps, almost, not sure, to develop crystals in which large numbers of thorium atoms are incorporated, which is it's cheating, basically. Good for them. They spent billions of dollars and they discovered something. Did they do humanity a favor? Of course not. Could they have worked on geothermal and solved all of our energy issues? Of course they could. Although this is technically quite complex, it has the advantage that we do not only study individual thorium nuclides in this way, but can hit approximately 10 to the power of 17 thorium nuclides simultaneously with the lasers, which is 1 million times more than there are stars in our galaxies. Well, like, you release that much radiation from every nuclear fuel pool worldwide every day. Of dangerous isotopes, by the way. But hey, now let's put a suit on him and give him a couple pieces of crystal and say he's a hero. On November 21st, 2023, after 114 years, the team was finally successful. For us, this is a dream. Coming true. Says Human Trader. Scum. Has focused his research entirely on the search for thorium transitions. So they waste all their monetary effort, all the precious resources, all the laboratory and students and institutions and universities and power grids, and we don't benefit nothing from it and won't either. when all they had to do was take 6 weeks of their time to resolve any geothermal issues for drilling a little bit deeper to get hotter temperatures, and everybody can have a future. Now nobody can have a future because they're playing around with something else stupid like nuclear. For example, the Earth's gravitational field could be analyzed so precisely that it could provide indications of mineral resources or earthquakes. Oh, wow, wow, wow. Yay. What about geothermal, which could get rid of gas, oil, coal, and stupid, idiotic nuclear and fusion and the idiotic small modular reactors? What about that stuff? Does that stuff ever matter? Should it matter? Could it matter? Would it matter? The only thing that matters is if you promote. Imagine if I'd done my shows. Imagine if every show I'd done for, say, the last decade, live show, 5 days a week, was pro-nuclear. And everything was equal to a banana and a potato chip and walking in the sunshine and flying on an airplane or sleeping next to somebody or eating peanut butter or 15 minutes in a kayak. Imagine if I came out with that garbage every day. I'd have 500,000 people on my show every night, wouldn't I? And they all be donating. There'd be like super chat donations that go out and buy a new car every day with the chats from the donation. Instead, I chose to fight for the 8 million species and fight for you and your friends, your families, your loved ones, and the future of humanity. And all races, all religions, all nationalities. Because I'm not bigoted or racist or prejudiced or biased. And I truly care. I actually care. I'm not a scumbag like Jeff Blumfield we showed you earlier. I'm not a scumbag like these useful idiots. These are just idiots. They got great education, incredible education, make an enormous amount of money, and they probably believe they're doing a moral and ethical thing. They're just blinded by the industry patting them on the back and giving them everything they want. They feel special. But they'll wake up one day. And they're going to look reality in the eye. And hopefully they pick up a gun and stick it in their fucking mouth and save the world. By not releasing any more of their nonsense into the ecosystem. The second new nuclear reactor is completed in Georgia. A carbon-free power. Like to call nuclear carbon-free is the strangest, most sadistic and twisted thing conceivable. It's the most resource-intensive industry in human history. Everything on a nuclear site is triple inspected. Before it ever gets touched, on the site for use, rather. It's triple inspected. 3 independent companies will inspect it to make sure it's the best of the best of the best that money can buy. Every nuclear power plant needs 2 gas, oil, and coal plants dedicated to it for 24 hours a day, 7 days a year, to build it, which takes 10, 15, 20 years, to see it through its lifespan, and then for another 50 or 60 years to decommission it. And for people to call it resource-free is the most insane. This carbon-free nonsense has got to stop. These are lunatics, is the only way to describe these people. Cost billions more and took years longer than originally projected. Splitting atoms to make carbon-free electricity. I don't even know where to go when I hear a statement like that. Splitting atoms, these are death atoms, by the way, to make carbon, and they never stop splitting atoms. The fuel pools have no containment. They're hemorrhaging into the farms that they're surrounded by. How can they ever look anybody in the eye? Because they're so disconnected, right? That's why it works for them. They're incapable of comprehending how evil they actually are. They don't understand it. Everybody's patting them on the back, and they're getting all kinds of money and accolades, and they're getting awards and bonuses, and everybody in the industry puts them on a pedestal, and they never see reality. Right? They're compartmentalized. They're the first two nuclear reactors built in the United States in decades. Yeah, Watts Bar was the other one. That took 43 years to come online. Total is $35 billion. It's probably going to be the last reactors you see built in the United States on top of that. Electric customers in Georgia have already paid billions. It must be the most expensive power plant ever. And the reactors originally projected cost $14 billion, be completed by 2017. And the total nears $35 billion. They haven't stopped spending money yet. So if you took $35 billion and a megawatt of geothermal is $4 million, you'd end up with 8.7 gigawatts instead of 2.5 gigawatts. You could have had 3 times the power within a couple of years. And you wouldn't have to deal with nuclear waste for 1 billion years. So why would you bother with nuclear? Because the industry is so evil, it just doesn't... It knows what it's doing. It's not naive. It's not gullible. The CEO of Atlanta-based Southern Company, which owns the Georgia Power, argues Volt will make the state's electrical grid more reliable and resilient and help the utility meet its goal of zeroing out carbon emissions by 2050. Right? This is a garbage can reply, right? This is a garbage basket diagnosis. So he's saying nuclear is better than 8,700 megawatts of renewable geothermal. How does that work though, see? Well, he's got to say that because otherwise he comes across as a monster. So when you look at all the numbers and you do all the comparisons, what I'm saying is absolutely right. What they're saying, because like when you talk about ABC, you got to realize how evil they actually are. Saskatchewan joins partnership and push towards micro-reactor technologies. What are you bothering with a fantasy? You don't even have a license or an applications even into the regulatory agencies for a license. And once you get it in there, you're at least 10 to 15 years away from getting permission to go ahead with the license. Now you got to go build an experimental reactor somewhere, because you're not just going to crank out reactors. You got to get the kinks out of it. It's going to take you another 10, 15 years. That's 30 years down the road, basically. But anything a micro-reactor can do, geothermal can do it in 1 year. Not 30 years down the road, not 40 years down the road, but this year. Not next year, but this year. Why would you even consider the stupid, idiotic, monstrous small modular reactors? Malaysia examines Japanese products to anticipate contamination of radioactive material. So Malaysia is working on the theory that nothing got out of the reactors. They're all doing that, right? They're all saying, oh, well, no, they just started releasing it last year, Dana. And your parents should be arrested for having somebody so fucking stupid is the only answer I got to people like you. You're so stupid, I can't believe you can tie your own shoes. Like, the official story about the International Atomic Energy Agency is nothing got out of this building. But what's your take on it? Did anything get out of the building, or is it all in my head? Is it all in my head? If you're pro-nuclear, call in and explain to me how nothing got out of these buildings. I dare you. I'm waiting. Give us a call. Tell us how everything stayed in those buildings that don't exist anymore. I like to hear that one. It's 1709-589-4406. I'm waiting. Give me a call and tell me how everything got out of the building. Oh, jeez, we got somebody on the phone. Hang on, I'll get you. Hotline, go ahead. Oh, Mr. Dana! Oh, Mr. Dana! Nothing got out of the buildings! You liar! You scammer! You bastard! That's Calm Down Charlie. We're mimicking Calm Down Charlie. We can take Calm Down Charlie for all the pretty pictures. Wasn't for Calm Down Charlie, wouldn't have all these pictures, right? In the Chicago division, Tokyo, blah, Calm Down Charlie. Hey, Calm Down Charlie. It's our biggest selling shirt. Now we're almost at 300, by the way. So how is it that nothing got out of these buildings? How did we ever get to that conclusion with the International Atomic Energy Agency? How does that work? I can't wrap my mind around how nothing got out of the buildings. According to the experts, nothing got out of these buildings. Come on, something must have got out. They were 19-story buildings, 190-foot buildings, 65-meter buildings. Come on, Colin, come on. Let's hear from the pro-nuclear community. I want you to explain to me how nothing got out of the buildings. Because I'm not trying to be mean or rude or nothing. I just want to know, right? Give me a call and tell me how nothing got out of the buildings. Where's the International Atomic Energy Agency? How come they're not calling me and correcting me? They can't read? Oh, that doesn't surprise me. They're nuclear experts, right? So I'll tell them the number. 709-589-4406. And if you go upstairs, and if you leave the basement, go upstairs, you can get your mommy to dial the number and call me. And you can explain to me how nothing got out of these buildings. What? Wait, what? Your mommy said you can't come out of the basement until the next morning? Oh. She's entertaining men, is she? Malaysia's not examining them. The pro-nuclear community in Malaysia is examining the Japanese products. Malaysia's not examining them. We'll carry out Phase 4 inspection of the food products imported from the Japs following the planned release of Fukushima treated radioactive wastewater on Thursday, August the 24th, 2023. Oh, to be a scumbag. Must be nice to live in that kind of a fantasy, eh? So they're saying that nothing got out of these buildings until August the 24th, 2023. And that whatever got out of the buildings is filtered. Dana. Fearmonger. No, I'm Dana's fearmongering. Let's go back and look at the building for a second. The ELP system. This is 2013. 2013, let me see. That's 2013. Not looking good. They weren't filtering water in 2013, were they? Oh, that's right. They weren't filtering it in 2014. In fact, August the 9th, 2014, they think, they're not sure, but they think, maybe, perhaps, almost, have the ELP system operational. It doesn't mean anything. So how could you filter water for those 4 years? How does that work? In fact, the tanks in 2013, the BBC reported, were full.
The Fukushima plant sits smack in the middle of an underground aquifer. Deep beneath the ground, the site is rapidly being overwhelmed by water. Beneath the surface, water flows downhill and into the basement of the damaged reactor buildings. There it is contaminated with high levels of radiation. To stop the groundwater flowing on into the nearby ocean, engineers are building an underground barrier. But that is causing the groundwater level to rapidly rise. It's now so high the water will soon reach the surface. Then it will start flowing overground into the sea. This week, the company that owns Fukushima, TEPCO, made this disturbing admission.
We understand that this water discharge is beyond our control, and we do not think the current situation is good.
Outside experts say it's now clear TEPCO is incapable of handling the cleanup at Fukushima. It's time for the Japanese government to step in. The situation is already beyond what TEPCO can handle, he says. If it were possible to take proper measures, they would have done it already. It's not as if TEPCO is refusing to do what they can. They're doing everything they can, but there are no perfect solutions. Even if the government does step in, it's not clear what it can do. The only other solution is to pump out the contaminated groundwater and put it in storage tanks. But after just 2 years, the site is already jammed with more than 1,000 giant tanks. Most of them are already full up. At least 400 tons of new water pours into the site every day, and it's going to continue for years and years. Fukushima's water crisis has only just begun. Rupert Wingfield-Hayes, BBC News in Tokyo. The Fukushima plant sits smack in the middle of an underground aquifer.
So how can you have water filtered in 2015 when you don't even have a system in 2014, and when all the tanks were full in 2000, 1,000 tanks were full in 2013, so how could you still be filling up the tanks today? How does that work? James Lucy left an interesting comment. He said, where's the shells on the beaches? So I've done research expeditions year after year after year after year. I'm still traumatized by that experience. And I just didn't do research expeditions. I went from Vancouver to British Columbia year after year without coming home. And you want to talk about hell, welcome to hell. And the beaches, if you go to my site, the majority of beaches don't look like this, but majority of beaches are beautiful golden sand, and they're made of shells, because the whole coastline used to look like that in 2011. Which is amazing. There was around 7,000 highly visible species. And the beaches no longer have any shells on them, but they were made of shellfish. So where are all the shells? And we're talking about shells. There's 27,000 islands in British Columbia. And there's nothing on them. They're naked because, radioactive fallout covered the entire planet. And I distinctly remember how haunting that was to go up there and there's no species. But the most craziest thing was there was no snails. There was no periwinkles. These are like bigger snails. There was none of those long twirly snails. There was none of those. There was no scallops. There was no different variety of scallops. There was no abalones. There was no razorback clams. There was no little necks or manila clams. There was no oysters. There was no mollusks. The mussels. Everything was covered in species. It was an unbelievable diversity. It was an unimaginable paradise. Indescribable ecosystem. You had 80 species of sponges. You had 480 species of worms. You had 78 species of sea anemones. They came in multiple vibrant colors, and they covered everything. You had 76 species of starfish. Each species came in multiple vibrant colors. You had endless corals. You had sea urchins. You had these incredible, unbelievable, highly visible diversity. Is that why they were pretending that they were in a building that don't exist at Fukushima? Is that why? If you think that's why, give us a thumbs up. Call in. Explain to me. Where's all the shellfish gone? Where are all the snails and mollusks? Where's all the starfish? Where's all the sea urchins? Where's the incredible diversity? Should these people be arrested for pretending they're in a building that don't exist? Shouldn't that be a crime? Why isn't that a crime? How can that not be a crime? Take a good look at this, because you're never going to see these pictures again. Those species are exterminated because of Fukushima. But everybody should really take it to heart that their species to your left are now exterminated to your carbon-free nuclear. It's carbon-free because it kills everything with carbon. The joke is you, see? And just because these monsters come out and regurgitate that narrative, that doesn't mean that they have a right to do it. That don't mean they're honest. That don't mean that it's true. They're pretending right there that they're in a building to the left that doesn't even exist. 120 feet above the stump, or the wreckage, I guess you can call it. Why isn't it? Why isn't this important? Why is this so unimportant? Why is it the censors can make a paycheck, censor me, but the foundations can't cut a check and support me? How does that work? How's that rationalized, I wonder, in the greater scheme of things? When do reality matter? When do we care about now? When does that come into the equation? And like for the International Atomic Energy Agency, the official story is nothing got out of these buildings. There's 4 of them, not just 2 of them, but there's 4 of them. At the top of each of them was 2 fuel pools with decades of reactor cores. That's gone. Like the inventories we're talking about are mind-boggling, but it's more than enough to quantify an extinction level event. And that's what I'm showing you with the research expeditions. Why did they arrest me over and over? Why did they drag me in court endless times? Why did they give me all them gag orders? Was that all? Should I just quit and give up and to hell with it and sit back and watch soap operas and suck my thumb? No, I don't have what. I haven't watched TV in 25 years or something. 30 years, I guess now, probably. I know a very long time. Well, I grew up with no TV and no radio. I read books, not fictional books either. I was very lucky. An incredible education as a kid, which set the stage for the rest of my life, obviously, right? I was incredibly fortunate to read pertinent books, unbelievable books. Japan's treated water release progressing as planned, International Atomic Energy Agency says. Like, what are you talking about? I showed twice tonight there is no ELP system. See, like the ELP system, it can't filter water. The Riva system can't filter it. The Kurion system couldn't filter it. The Siri system can't filter it. Nobody in the world can filter it because you got a nuclear meltdown, you're sucking water out of those reactor buildings and putting it through a filter. You got to run away immediately. You can't step over the hoses where you're transferring the water. You're talking a dozen sievers per liter. You're talking fuel particles. Like the science is pretty straightforward, but the average person has no concept of real science. And they know that, right? They're counting on that, right? They dumbed them down for decades and decades with Batman and Superman and Spider-Man and the Hulk and an endless barrage now of these so-called superheroes. But we're not fooled by them. The task force set up an International Atomic Energy Agency has confirmed that nothing got out of the buildings. Like, really, wrap your mind around that. Call in and explain it to me. Explain to me how nothing got out of the buildings, because I really need to know. That's probably why I can't sleep lately, because I can't wrap my mind around how nothing got out of the buildings. You got Shinzo Abe's look-alike. Shinzo's dead. He ate a couple of bullets, thank goodness. Dismissing concerns, Japan Prime Minister invites a number of ministers to eat seafood from the sea in Fukushima. And now I covered that yesterday on an early show because that upset me. They're suggesting them going down and eating something and claiming it came from the local area, which is no way they're going to eat it, somehow means that everything now is hunky-dory. Like I see as usual, nuclear scientists, their parents got them locked up in the basement. They can't call me. I'm sure they wanted to call me, but their parents keeps them in the basement after supper, right? Because, like, if you're a nuclear scientist, you probably can't function in real society, or you gotta live in this fake society or in your mom's basements. Saskatchewan joins nuclear partnership and push towards micro-reactors. We actually covered that earlier, didn't we? Novel explanation for long-standing neutron lifetime problems proposed by UP nuclear physicist. Oh, this is a great one. Novel explanation. Novel explanation. How about a novel explanation to explain away how nothing got into these buildings? I'd like to hear that one. I would love to hear that explanation. But they got these physicists, they're usually so disconnected. Not all of them. Some of them are generally, they're just compartmentalized. They don't understand the bigger picture, right? They're focusing on these little nuances, the little minutiae, these details of details. They don't even know the bigger picture. They're fixated. And the industry is really good at isolating these people. They're usually, a lot of these I noticed over the years, nuclear specialists are autistic or like they're slightly autistic and signs of Down syndrome, where they're able to just isolate one thing and sit and do that the rest of their lives. So they know that if you knock a neutron out, that the unstable neutrons die after about 14 minutes. The popular reason that some undiscovered phenomenon might be at play. I got an idea what it might be. Lord knows I play around with this stuff all the time. If this theory, it's a theory. It's a conjecture. It's an opinion. Is correct. The beam experiment suggests that the unstable neutron lasts an average of 14 minutes and 48 seconds, but the bottle experiment suggested 14 minutes and 39 seconds, a 9-second discrepancy. So I think it's because the moon is different and you're not putting in the spin of the Earth, right, into that equation. And you're also not putting in the fact that these are influenced by just, any kind of magnetic storms from the solar system. So if we have a huge sun magnetic storm coming past Earth, like, I'm not saying any of these are what's going on. I'm just making it up. Because that's what they're doing, right? They're making it up. The theories. And why are you going to put this endless amount of resources, people, energy, monetary, equipment, precious metals, everything else into these experiments, and your planet is dying. All the species are dying. And you're going to create more of it. And you're not even going to look at geothermal, because geothermal solves all your issues. You don't need any of this if you look at geothermal. When should we look at geothermal? When everybody's dead and gone? Nuclear fuels resume 200-hole drill program at KC project. It's like, why are you drilling holes for more uranium when last year uranium went backwards 1.7 gigawatts and renewables came ahead 507 gigawatts, which is equal to 570 large nuclear reactors coming online in animosity equivalent of renewables? Why would you look at nuclear? Why would you invest in nuclear? Why do that, right? Oh, we're going to drill here, there, everywhere else. Woo-hoo, life is good. Invest in us. Yeah, but the nuclear industry has gone backwards. There is no nuclear renaissance. And anything nuclear can do, geothermal can do it better. So you drilled 100 holes, why not turn them into geothermal and actually make something out of it? Is that stupid? Fallout shelter nuclear reactor versus a power plant. Is upgrading worth it? This is a video game. You love this stuff. This is madness. This is pure propaganda. It's really interesting propaganda, by the way. Power is unequivocally the most important resource in fallout shelter. No brainwashing going on there at all. Without it, everything in the vault stops working, and you'll be left without food, water. That's if you're in an underground vault after a nuclear war. And you'll be left without food, water, or anything else you got going on. So power plant versus nuclear reactor and fallout shelter. The nuclear reactor is the best source of power and fallout shelter, although it's a lot more expensive, has more requirements than a power plant. This is a video game, folks. The nuclear reactor is definitely a late game purchase, but the power plant has got you this far, so is it worth the upgrade? Well, it depends on if you want to plan on upgrading the nuclear reactor purely from a stats perspective. The power plant produces more power. However, a super reactor gives you the most power production you can get in the game, super reactor. And an advanced reactor, the small modular reactors, puts you on a step ahead of the power plant. This is craziness. So who plays the video games mostly? The children, right? So here's the children coveting advanced small modular reactors. So when it comes time for them to vote for small modular reactors, what do you think they're going to vote for? Is that what a nuclear waste management organization in English over the last 4 days was letting children 16 years older and over vote on a deep geological repository in their farmlands? Where everything's going to be repackaged for 140 years, is that why? And when you package everything shipped there is going to be vented, and repackage it means you're releasing hideous amounts of isotopes into the farmlands. What a fucking stupid industry. Excuse me for swearing. Excuse me for being upset about a genocide and omnicide. Even an advanced reactor puts you a step ahead of the power plant. These type of small modular reactors, that's what considered an advanced reactor is, the small modular reactors. It doesn't exist. The only license out there was NuScale. We got a story here tonight of NuScale packing it in. And everybody else that had anything to do with it packing it in. You can get a power plant to fallout shelter by upgrading the power generator. You can get a nuclear power plant in a video game. And that's how you win the video game, is if you get a nuclear power plant, folks. Or get a small modular reactor. That's the best way to win the video game, is get a small modular reactors. That's not despicable brainwashing at all. Is it? Not even a little bit, right? It's not brainwashing in overdrive, is it? And since Amazon Prime came out with that series, Fallout series, these video games have reignited again. Disgusting, isn't it? The brainwashing is unbelievable. She's ready to blow. You're planning new nuclear umbrella with 300 French nuclear missiles. Now, Macron got criticized for promoting a nuclear war. Spread across the continent for a showdown with Russia. Well, who's going to win that war? Oh, that's right, nobody. You're not going to win it. I'm not going to win it. The birds are not going to win it. Whatever insects are left are not going to win it. The whales ain't going to win it. They're all too emaciated. They're too busy dying all over your continent coastlines. French President Macron has suggested that submarine-launched warheads are fanned across the continent to shore up collective defense. You know Macron, right? The stupidest of the stupidest. Like, they don't get elected because they're the smartest cookie on the fucking shelf, okay? They're elected because they're the most useful idiot they can find at the time. Their job is not to do something good for the country. Their job is to wreck the country. And now you have all these countries being wrecked by the invaders. There's more invaders in Ireland than there is the Irish in 1 year. It's the same way in most of Europe now. So there's something going on, isn't it? And it's not going to be good. So like this endless fear-mongering has been going on for 80 years now. This whole industry on fear-mongering. Lead nuclear test veteran in UK calling for real compensation. Long too late, right? Bless his heart. Exposed to radiation during the British... Now, it came out that the British were told not to give these people medical care. They were meant to be followed, cohort subjects, and endless academic studies done on them and their children and their offsprings. They were subject to a frequent and dangerous levels of radiation as a result of U.S. Operation Grapple, nuclear tests on Christmas Island, where the babies, they call them jelly babies there now. Between 1957 and 1958, he joined 22,000 victims in nuclear tests. These weren't nuclear tests, these were, they were nuclear human experiments. Speaking of his experience in Christmas Island, so when they told us they were planning to let off the atomic bomb, some of the soldiers started crying, some pleading. It's not the first time we heard that. We sat about 20 miles away from the explosions, and I remember there was music playing like it was quite the occasion, and then the countdown. We were wearing our khaki shorts and shirts, right? So they were wearing little shorts and t-shirts, and the scientists were wearing full protective gear, hazmat suits, goggles, breathing apparatuses, and they were in concrete bunkers. But they were wearing their khaki shorts and t-shirts and were sitting on the grass with their back to the explosion. Shut our eyes and covered them with our hands, and when it went off, it felt like a hairdryer going across my back. Imagine how hot it must have been to feel that extra heat even at the equator, because it was super hot where they were already. And I can see the bones in my hands, 20 miles away, with his back to it and his hands over his eyes. You can still see the bones through his hands. The scientists, though, they were in the shelters with all the equipment on. After the bombs, we just got back to work. There was no health checks, no cure. And last December, they sent us a medal in the post. Here's your medal, fuck off. He said there's only 1,200 of us left alive in the UK. We're waiting for us all to peg out, stop making a fuss, but I was knowingly put in harm's way. And no one knows how many died or how many marriages failed or how many children were born deformed. We were seen as disposable. And there was two comments there. And one of them, because he was complaining of skin cancer, right? And one of the comments says the typical person in Britain, I can't remember the numbers, were dying from skin cancer. And remember, they closed 9,400 farms in Britain because of Chernobyl for almost 30 years. You know, Britain had a plutonium mixed oxide fuel meltdown known as Windscale. And they hit it. And remember what the Donneray and Sellafield reprocessing sites have done. And remember those Magnox reactors are nasty emissions. All their reactors are surrounded by farms. All of them are hemorrhaging radiation. Should have been abandoned, right? Ireland, Scotland, and the United Kingdom should have been abandoned after Chernobyl. Because when you close 9,400 farms, you're acknowledging your country is destroyed. You're just not saying it out loud. Russia will sink Britain under a nuclear tidal wave and reduce the U.S. to ashes, says Putin ally. So, like, every week we see 2, 3, 4 headlines like this. I just don't bother covering it. Any bid by the West to put boots on the ground in Ukraine to inflict a strategic defense on Russia, they're talking about NATO, would result in Armageddon. But the media loves this because people now start begging the government to get more nuclear weapons, is how they see it, right? If NATO deploys troops in Ukraine, well, there's already a NATO supplying all the weapons to Ukraine, for fuck's sakes. It's a proxy war, right? And it's like the genocide in Ukraine is just... They're using drones with bombs on them to run people down. So people are running around trees and trying to get away from these drones. They'll chase them all over the place and then run into them and blow them up. If that's not the cruelest thing imaginable in a war, what actually is? And what do you think the next war is going to be after they get rid of this? You really think that the drones now won't be just... When they'll just go punch and it locks onto a human and then it just chases the human till it corners him and blows him up, right? You can basically, like my drone is 6 years old or something. And I can follow you. All I got to do is put draw a little box around you on my screen. And I can walk away, go have a cup of tea. That drone will if I'm 2 feet away from you and I do that, that drone will follow you everywhere you go. If I'm 100 feet away from you, the drone will follow you everywhere you go. And if, there's another button there where I can tell it where to go. So I can just draw a line around you and send it there. And then go, boom. That's 6 years ago. Well, that's what Russia's doing, right? It's unbelievable what we're seeing. There's around 600,000, you can call them soldiers if you want, they're conscripts, right? That are dead. Now they got busloads of girls, and they don't even know what they're doing. They're like children, eh? In the videos that showed up yesterday. It's over the top stuff. Let me play a video for you. How about that? Instead of telling you about it, let me play a video. Just give me a second. I probably can find a video or several hundred. Okay, we're almost to it. It's there we go. I'm just gonna turn the volume on. Just bear with me. So this is a drone chasing down a soldier. This is what they're doing. Let me restart that. So the drone just chases them around and blows them up. That's called war now. That's how stupid we've become as a society, that we can sit there and accept that. And I don't know how many of these videos. I got around 300 of these videos. Like, what's the rationale of calling that how can you call that a war? So to conscript these people, they just jack them right off the streets. Let me see if I can find you a video of that. They just grab them, stuff them in the vans. Here's 17-year-olds in Ukraine being trained.
Рівняйсь! Струнку! Батько наш Бандера! Україна мати, ми за Україну підем воювати! Батько наш Бандера! Україна мати, ми за Україну підем воювати!
So you got 17-year-olds. I don't have any way to describe the evilness of what we're seeing, right? And they're calling that a war. I don't know why they're calling that a war, but the disconnect is unbelievable. And every time I watch those videos, and lots of them I have to stop it. Lots of times I got to get a cup of tea and I can't watch anything else for a while. I have to watch these videos. And I apologize to everybody for making you watch it. But what do you think the next war is going to look like? Like, even putting guns on a drone and using that to chase down people and shoot them is insane. But to put a bomb on it and to run them down, these are people that don't even... there was a video yesterday or this morning of a guy who managed to defend himself. He had like a small sack of potatoes on his back, and the drone was coming. He was running around with the drone. At the last second, he threw the sack at the drone exploded, and he dove, and then he ran away as quick as he could. But there's nowhere to run. There's no shelter. Even if you're in the hole in the ground, it'll just fly into the hole, right? And NATO is promoting this. Canada, United States, many countries are promoting this. What are we going to do when the robots shows up this year or next year? Robots and drones, and we got Big Spot and Dog and everything else running around. Suicide drones that are driven by people. Oh, look at him run. Come here, boys. Have a look at this. What's this guy? Boom. Where does that kind of disconnect actually come from? You're not fighting for your country. You're fighting for a 3-second thrill. You're not fighting for a moral compass or something greater. You're not sacrificing so that your children can get out and eat McDonald's and everything else. No. By the way, please don't eat McDonald's. I got videos where they were trying to burn hamburgers, McDonald's hamburgers. They won't catch on fire. I got videos of animals being given McDonald's. They won't eat it. You put dog food, you put McDonald's, you put other stuff there. The dog will go right to the other food. Won't touch it. If you try to give a dog food, he'll turn his head away and sneeze, right? And there's so much nasty stuff in that. So who's winning there? Just the weapons producer, because they supply both sides, right? Why don't we go get those fuckers? Let's go to war against them. Let's use the drones to bomb them when they leave work. Fly in their car and blow them up. What's wrong with that? They promoted it. They created stuff to do to your children. Why shouldn't you do it to them? Doesn't make too much sense. Oppenheimer may have ignored the U.S. nuclear victims. May have ignored them. He actually came out later as anti-nuclear, I believe. He was ousted because there's a lot of power in that position, right? And I can't remember. I used to be able to rattle it off the top of my head. The other people. It just doesn't seem to matter anymore. Last summer, the film Oppenheimer captured audiences the world over with its depictions of the creation of the world's first atomic bomb at the New Mexico Los Alamos National Laboratory, which is a massive nuclear wasteland, and it sits on one of the biggest aquifers in the United States that's unbelievably contaminated since the 50s. They dumped the majority of their legacy waste directly in the soil, like Hanford. Hanford, is unbelievable what they done. 450 billion gallons of nuclear waste into the soil. It's the equivalent of an aquarium, 6 feet wide, 518 feet tall, wrapped around the entire planet more than once. And but if you had a leader in your house, everybody dies within 20 minutes. If you have a leader in a restaurant, everybody dies within 20 minutes. And you do that every 20 minutes for 1 million years. That same leader. So imagine a wall, 518 feet tall, 6 feet wide, wrapped around the entire planet of that fucking stuff. Oh no, Dana, all the high-level waste can fit in the swimming pool. This is just one facility, by the way, we're talking about, Hanford. In Los Alamos National Laboratory, most of the nuclear waste at WIP, Waste Isolation Pilot Project, which somehow became a plant. It was supposed to be just a test, became a full-time repository. The majority of the waste is coming from Los Alamos National Laboratory. That's why they had a meltdown in 2014. And when we covered that in 2014, that for a whole week, and KRQE Channel 13 or something in New Mexico, in Albuquerque, New Mexico, chopped up one of my videos and put it up on TV and call me a conspiracy theorist. But all I was doing was talking about what happened and the documentation. And I used to use videos from them on top of to show the plumes coming out of the place. You know, I'm only doing this because the world needs someone that's not afraid of this cowardly industry, this monster. And these are monsters, but they're only monsters because they're cowards, right? It's a coward. It's an unbelievable coward industry. There's no we don't have any comparison to this industry of cowardly and monsters. And everybody that supports nuclear are Jekylls and Hydes in real life. They're the real Jekylls and Hydes. So Oppenheimer got an Oscar, really. How could something so insidious get an Oscar? And the lies they told in it are unconscionable. Oh, that gets the Oscars. They made $1 billion, was it, off it? So that makes it good, apparently. Well, Dana, you didn't make $1 billion. Well, I wouldn't want $1 billion that way. Scumbag. Diablo Canyon Unit 2 shut down for refueling. Get an inside look at the nuclear disease factory. They bring in 1,000 employees or something because they don't want their own people breathing in the radiation when they open it up. But this was an extra one because this one they're doing inspections. They're going to try to get an extension. So it's 3 times. It's like 3 maintenances shut down at the one time, right? You know, around 12,000 maintenance upgrades and stuff like this to try to get it to pass for. And they'll get it to pass. You don't need to do anything. It'll pass because there's no checks and balances anyway, right? They always bring in the extra workers. Yeah, like it increases the size of the staff, but that staff is not going to be there helping. Because otherwise they're going to get health problems down the road. Because when you open that reactor up, then all the radiation escapes. This is why they always bring in outside people that are not going to be showing up in long-term insurance, right? And every time you look at this industry, the only equation that you're left with is, why is the world so coward to let this happen? Why does the world sit in silence and allow this to happen? Why is this industry so gobblish? It's so much like goblins. It's because there's no checks and balances. They've never been held accountable. They have no incentive not to be evil. And when evil has no incentive not to be evil, we're in a whole fucking lot of trouble. And so I guess we denigrated into the cursing again tonight. I apologize. That's all good. What am I looking at? Nuclear mining footprint is smaller than solar and wind, says Eco-Modernist Group. Nuclear mining footprint, and this is the picture they're showing you. Look. I think I got a few pictures I wouldn't mind adding to that equation. Bear with me. There's another side of the story that they weren't quite honest about. Carbon-free. Let's go look at their carbon-free nuclear disease factories. There's a lot of nuclear mining that you're not going to hear, but I can tell you that much. Nuclear, what are we going to do with you? The Fukushima tanks are empty, right? Because if you fill it up with the radiation water we're talking about, it's 1.4 million sieverts per liter. There's the shoe bomber, and then there's the nuclear terrorist, Stinkfoot, who's supposed to be attacking me, who's probably attacking me right now. He's probably the reason there's so many lies about me. And there's nothing I can do about it. They got all the power, they got all the money. He's after telling everybody for 15 years that nuclear's like walking in sunshine. That it's like the rocks. It's like bananas, Dana. Or like potato chips. Which explains why they're dumping it in the oceans. The British for 30 years, not the only country to do it, but the British in particular were exceptionally vicious. They had several cargo ships that were outfitted to take 45-gallon drums out, and they would just drive along throwing 45-gallon drums over for days at a time, go back, fill up, and go back out and do it again. And this is what they done for 30 years. They just went out and threw it off the side of the boat. They didn't care about anything. Well, nuclear's not too bad. These people were able to go back to the graveyard after 7 years. If you see one-ton bags and thousands of them, you don't go back. You don't go back to this graveyard. You don't go back to Fukushima. Look how carbon-free Fukushima is. As far as you can see, look how carbon-free it is. Yummy. Nuclear is the most toxic. Look at the mining, nuclear mining. Look at this nuclear mining, boys. These people would have died with their nuclear mining. They're spraying regions at Fukushima. They would have died that day in their paper suits. He's dying that day for sure, or that hour. Here's a nuclear mine. Look how tiny it is. Well, oh yeah, that's right. Wait now, what did they show us? They show us that, right? Oh, nuclear mining footprint is smaller. Yeah, smaller because you dump it in the oceans. You dump it all over us and everybody else. You dump it in the grounds. And I mean you dump it. Your mines, every uranium mine has chemical ponds. They're not water, they're chemicals. And that's allowed to evaporate into the environment. Look how carbon-free it is. My goodness. Wow, look how resource-free that stuff is. And once you get it out of the ground, like the open-cut mine, which the open-cut mine is a big difference from what they show you. That's what they show you. This is what it actually looks like. But then it's got to go through the ore stockpiles. You got to go through the crushers, the ball mill. You got to add water, the thickeners, the acid, the leaching tanks, the thickeners, the sand filters, the solvent extractors, the uranium precipitation tanks, the thickeners, the dryers, the centrifuges. The dryers are going to evaporate the radiation into the ecosystem with the water. Whatever's left over is put in the drums, and then it's sent to the market. Then the reprocessing at the market is insidious. The fuel fabrications, the mining, the milling, the enrichment, the fuel fabrications, the reprocessing. There is no storage, the vitrification. And they abandon these places and leave these chemical ponds. And at the sites, they'll usually, the outdoor storage in the old sites, they used to shoot any birds that would land in the ponds because they were so radioactive. And Hanford, they've evacuated the lunchroom at Hanford on a number of occasions because of hot fruit flies and wasps who had touched radioactive waste and went into the laboratory and set off all the alarms. There's a 15,000 abandoned uranium mines and tailing ponds and chemical ponds in the Navajo territory because, it's so carbon-free. And all these communities, you can't drink the water because it's so carbon-fucking-free. Like, these suits can't protect you in this environment. And putting rusted tanks, 45-gallon drum, rusted 45-gallon drums, in a hole in the grounds with tarps is unconscionable, no matter how you look at it. It's the lowest fucking form of life imaginable right there. And this is what they do. They do it everywhere. All nuclear sites will do this. Right? They all do that, and then they got the incredible fucking hubris to come out and say that they got a smaller fucking footprint. This is the silos, the weapon silos. This is only a fraction of them, obviously. There's some more of them. Montana, Nebraska, Wyoming, Colorado. These are missile silos, these red dots, and they're right in these little communities, right? And so they're actually using the little communities as human shields. This is the nuclear industry, and you're tying their boots all the time, right? So how carbon-free is it to abandon all these cities, these universities, these malls, these banks, these schools, these billion-dollar hospitals? How fucking carbon-free is that again? I forget. You want to call in and explain it to me, anybody? How is it used in the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society and the immigrants who don't speak the language carbon-fucking-free? Anybody want to explain that one to me? You can call in at 709-589-4406. Because I would like to know. I'm just curious. I'm not trying to be an asshole. I guess it doesn't matter.
He knew the world would not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that one way or another.
Oh, no audio? Shit. I screwed that up, did I? How are you going to call that? Thank you, by the way, for the text. How are you going to describe that as carbon-free when it actually looks like this, and it looks like that, and it looks like this? How does that friggin' work? Would you go down there and take a picture and say this is carbon-free? Right? I know I'm always screwing up. Volume. Thanks, Colette. Good stuff. So go down and tell the farmers that their cows are carbon-free that died because they ran away and left them behind. How about that? France wants to build 14 new nuclear reactors by 2050, but 6 is more realistic. They're not going to build 6 reactors by 2050. It's crazy to suggest they are. Sun Nuclear announces landmark update to further advance radiation therapy workflows. So first off, I can do whole presentations. Should nuclear power plants, dumps, and disease factories and radiation therapy, death atoms surrounded by farms be closed at once? So I can't putting death atoms in your body make you better, because it can't. But putting the word therapy on it and radiation, that doesn't mean that it's going to be therapy. Radiation therapy. Oh yeah, radiation therapy. Just keep yelling that over and over and cashing your... Because you'll spend $900,000 to radiate you till there's no way you can live, and they'll give it back to your family because your family now will liquidate their assets to keep you alive for another couple of weeks, right? That's exactly what they're doing. That's why they're doing it too. Nurses are assassins, right? A massive U.S. nuclear plant is finally complete, and it may be the last of its kind. There's an understatement. There's a wish and a hope and a dream. What role does nuclear medicine play in the management of cancer? It doesn't play any role. I've done entire presentations with academic studies on this over and over and over and over. And I'm going to do it tonight, even though I should. But you may kill a tumor, and then you got 8 more different tumors everywhere else. That's what happens every single time. Rather, if you do succeed in reducing a tumor, you radiated the whole fucking body. I'll show you a couple of studies. Because not showing it to you, the industry said, well, how come Dana didn't show it to you? He shows you everything else. Why didn't he show you that? Because he's a liar. I've heard it all for so long. I know how scumbags work. Let me see if I get lucky and find it. Clickety, clickety, click, click. I'll just flash you through a whole bunch of studies and see if you can put 2 and 2 together yourself. How about that? If you're not familiar with this subject. Oh, radiation therapy / death therapy is what we call it. Because that's the appropriate thing to call radiation therapy, is called it death therapy. Come here, get your radiation dose. And lots of morphine. Just before he dies, we'll send you home so your family can liquidate their assets. Because Canada only lets you spend $900,000 on radiation therapy. $900,000 to murder you. Well, like after all these years, it's never cured anybody. We're still doing it. And I can take you through all these studies. I'm not going to do it tonight because we're running out of time here. But you should try reading through these studies. Just stop the video and read through this stuff. And what you're going to see is radiation destroys everything in your body. You might get rid of that tumor, original tumor, but your whole fucking body is just destroyed. And they love it. They thrive on this stuff. This is their bread and butter, man. It's huge money every year. The nuclear industry pulls in. They got 9,000 ways of pulling money in. And all of it's evil. Every friggin' step of the way. Like calling it radiation therapy, and then it destroys your... Right, the studies were saying, you know, my favorite radiation rectal injuries. How many injuries would you like? Radiation lung injuries. How many do you need to know about? Your gland injuries from radiation. Radiation-induced liver diseases. Radiation-induced bile duct injuries. Radiation. It destroys your whole body. No, it's therapy, Dana. Have a nice day, Dana. I can show you so much you can't even comprehend it. I still have fucking nightmares. This means I'm going to have nightmares tonight, by the way, just doing this. Another night sat up, sucking my fucking thumb, waiting for sleep to show up. Do you get it? Do you get it yet? Your fucking carbon-free nuclear, you get it yet? Every time someone says carbon-free nuclear, I want to kick the shit out of them. It's weird, isn't it? I know I'm not going to do it. I know I can't do it. But I really would like to do it. I'd walk up and punch him in the stupid fucking face. When people say radiation therapy, I just want to grab them, pull the fucking hair right out of their heads, swing them into a big fucking tree or something. A healthcare provider may recommend nuclear medicine. And if you're smart, you'll run away as quick as you fucking can. U.S. firm overcomes 2 key barriers to reach scalable nuclear fusion energy. Does anybody believe this nonsense? Anything to get you to invest in them again, right? Every couple of months you'll come out with this nonsense. Boosting the plasma density and containing the dense plasma. A tokamak reactor is essentially used around the world to produce an energy from fusion reaction. There is no energy produced. That's the problem, right? They're always 50 years away from fusion. But see, that statement makes you believe you're an investor. You're like, well, Jason, honey, they're producing. We're going to invest some of that pension into it. When it comes out, you won't be sorry, sweetie. 2 weeks later, the stocks dive again. We've seen that now for 13 years straight, same routine over and over and over. Macron is under fire, the French scumbag is under fire for proposing an open debate on nuclear deterrence. About friggin' time, you ask me. This is a great story. First Nation leaders voiced opposition to nuclear power plants. And they made some great points. Like he said, his children in the current generation deserve to grow up with insects and birds and wildlife. And if you get nuclear power plants, you won't have that. And he's 100% right too, right? And New Brunswick nuclear power plant is hemorrhaging 14,600,000 trillion atoms of tritium-3H each year legally, which is equal to a large-scale nuclear accident. But they can't contain tritium with these CANDU reactors. These are not CANDU. These are will destroy and kill do's reactors. Keeping a hometown tradition alive. So they find these useful idiots, bless their hearts, who want to keep these traditions, which is, I understand that, right? But you're talking about a nuclear wasteland, and she's back in the nuclear wasteland. These are abandoned communities, and doesn't understand the concept. It's okay to keep your traditions alive. I support you wholeheartedly, but don't bring people back into the nuclear wasteland. Don't go back in there yourself, honey, because just because you can't see it or smell it or hear it or feel it or touch it or pick it up or throw rocks at it, doesn't mean the industry doesn't know what it's doing, right? It knows it's going to destroy you. And I just, you can't help but admire some of this stuff. This is the rice dance, and they're trying to keep the tradition alive, and that's the old footage I would imagine. And they got these kids who are probably the last generation, and it used to be a wonderful thing, right? You used to celebrate the rice every year, and now you have to fear the rice every year because it's still the biggest producer of rice is Japan. It's the breadbasket for Asia and certainly North America now. And it's radioactive nuclear wasteland, the entire country. And we covered a whole country, year after year after year. And I'm not going to make assertions that I can't back up. And I can back up every assertion I typically do, right? Which is why I always fantasize about doing a radio show where I don't have to work like a dog every day. And my heart goes out to the victims because the nuclear industry couldn't care less about them. Somebody should. And what can you do, right? Nuclear industry is only good for one thing. First of its kind nuclear disease factory is terminated. So NuScale, small modular reactor, got the boot finally, totally. A project to build a first of its kind small modular reactor power plant was terminated Wednesday. Oregon, they're fucking scumbags too, man. They used to call me up and give me a hard time, eh? Real scumbags. NuScale Power has the only small nuclear reactor design certified for use in the United States. Yeah, and they just shut it down because 18 years and they've never produced a single. They don't even have a fucking site. They just stole the money from the investors. That's all they done. Should have never been on the stock exchange. And their application into the regulatory agency was a partial application. They didn't even have a full application in. We already covered that story earlier. And I'm not sure if I'm doing a show tomorrow night. It doesn't look like I'm going to. That doesn't mean I won't do a show, because you know what I'm like. It doesn't look like I'm going to be doing a show. Pretty burnt out. I'm most likely I'll get back on Sunday to the regular schedule again. I can't keep up with everything, and I'm very frustrated because I can't do the things I got to get done. And how are we supposed to have a future if we can't challenge this industry? It's very frustrating for me, and it consumes me a lot. Right? I know it shouldn't. And that's just me. I'll get over it in a few days. Get back on schedule Sunday. We had nothing but bad weather, heavy friggin' weather. I like to go on a vacation, to tell you the truth, for like 2 weeks, and I know I'm never going to do that. I'm just saying I would love to go on a vacation and just do nothing for like 2 weeks and sit on a tropical beach drinking margaritas or whatever the case may be. I haven't drank in almost 30 years. I like to, it's hard to explain. You got an extinction event, and all my research expeditions, and I don't see the world reacting or responding. At some point, they're going to have to fucking acknowledge what has already happened over the last 13 years. At some point, the world is going to have to wake up and smell the death factory machine that is the die-off worldwide. And again tonight, I know this week I was tired because twice this week, and I forgot to turn the volume on after a video, right? And I turned the volume down because I'm in the volume in the video. When you're playing a video, it's not good. And it's just because I'm tired, I guess, or something. Right, I'll recoup over the next couple of days. I'd rather be out on the ocean. I'd rather be in the woods doing research, but it just doesn't seem to be in the cards, unfortunately. Terrifyingly. And the world will regret that we didn't. There's nothing I can do, but I'm doing the best I can. Should the nuclear plants and dumps, also known as disease factories that produce death atoms, that are surrounded by farms, be closed at once? And, well, yes, they should, Mr. D. Absolutely. Good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. Have a great night. We'll see everybody on the next show. I'm thinking it's going to be Sunday? Now, I could show up tomorrow afternoon and do a show. Who knows with me, right? If there's a breaking story, everything's possible. And, let me big shout out to everybody that watches these shows or supports me or anything like that. Bless your hearts, every one of you. You're so important. There's so few of us. It's very heartbreaking, and I admire all of you. And to be honest with you, I don't expect you people to hang around as long as you have. Such a morbid subject and topic. Such a difficult subject, right? And I appreciate it. You have no idea. Maybe you do, but I can't possibly articulate how wonderful you people must be to tolerate someone as angry as me. Hey, I'm a poet and didn't know it. Have a great night. Have a great day tomorrow. Have a great weekend. Hopefully I'll see you tomorrow. We'll probably see you on Sunday. Take care, folks.